Oswald Cobblepot, Gotham City's gentleman of crime, the man of 1,000 umbrellas, that fine feathered fink best known to Batman fans as simply the Penguin. Pingy's been getting a lot of attention lately thanks to having his very own live-action series on HBO. It stars Colin Farrell and is a spin-off of The Batman, the 2022 film directed by Matt Reeves and starring Robert Pattinson as, well, the Batman. Farrell's version of the Penguin is introduced there and is among that film's many highlights, and so far, his HBO series is of the same caliber. It seems as though the Penguin is having a moment. And I say it's about time. If you look back across the character's history, you'll find that when it comes to memorable Penguin stories, the pickings are pretty slim. Even though he made his debut in 1941, which means he's been around almost as long as Batman himself, the Penguin hasn't inspired the great writers and artists of the comics medium in the same way that other similarly senior members of Batman's Rogues Gallery have. There's no equivalent of The Killing Joke or Two of a Kind for the Penguin, which is not to say there haven't been great Penguin stories published over the past 83 years. It's just that you've got to look a little harder to find them. A good place to start is the very first Penguin story from Detective Comics number 58, the December 1941 issue. It's a story written by Bill Finger, penciled by Bob Kane, and inked by Jerry Robinson and George Roussos, and it's titled One of the Most Perfect Frame-Ups. The story opens with Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson attending an art show where apparently all of the artists and other visitors are cartoonish ethnic stereotypes, starting with this guy, an artist whom Dick insults by saying he needs more lessons, who responds with, "I, the great Bustoli, needs more lessons? Bah! What fools!" You can't get mad at me for doing a stereotypical Italian accent. That's how it's written. As they walk around the gallery, they pass this, let's say dapper-looking fellow. Bruce scolds Dick for laughing at the guy, then turns around and says, "Ha! He does look like a penguin, though, doesn't he?" Nice parenting, Bruce. Suddenly, a guard rushes in and informs everyone that the gallery has been robbed, and everyone must submit to being searched before any of them will be allowed to leave. The guests reluctantly agree, including this guy who says, "I don't mind being searched. I only hope they catch the thief." What is that? Is that another stereotypical Italian? I don't know, and the outfit is no help at all. A black Stetson hat, a string tie, pince-nez glasses, and a pipe? And he talks like that? Not a clue. Anyway, the guard searches everyone, including that penguin-ish fellow who helpfully opens his umbrella, and the stolen paintings are nowhere to be found. Later that night, the Penguin shows up at the hideout of a big-time racketeering outfit, removes the rolled-up stolen paintings from the hollow handle of his umbrella, and presents them to the boss. The boss is so impressed that he immediately allows Penguin to join the gang, and before long, Penguin is planning all their criminal capers. Bruce Wayne himself is even present at one such caper. He just so happens to be at an auction house when he sees the Penguin and thinks to himself, "That's the fatty Dickin I saw at the art show." Gotta love that crackling Bill Finger dialogue, don't you? I'm sorry, fat jokes aren't cool. I'm not laughing at the fat joke, I'm laughing at the crassness of it. Bruce Wayne sees the Penguin and his first thought is, "That's the same tub of shit from the gallery." It was a different time, I guess. Can you imagine any version of Batman in any medium from the last, say, 25 years talking like that, other than the one from Frank Miller's All-Star Batman, I mean? Sadly, the partnership between the Penguin and the boss is short-lived. After a couple more successful robberies, the boss decides Penguin is getting a little too big for his britches. So, the Penguin immediately murders him, shooting the boss dead with his umbrella, which is also a gun. The Penguin takes over full control of the gang, and they immediately begin planning their next heist, the details of which are overheard by Batman, who is close by in disguise. Batman sends Robin home to do his homework. Nice parenting, Bruce. I mean it this time. And drops in to break up the gang's attempt to rob a jade statue from an auction house. He easily defeats the two thugs, gratuitously destroying a painting in the process, but then the Penguin himself shows up, renders Batman unconscious with a blast of knockout gas from his umbrella, completes the theft of the jade statue, pulls the alarm, and leaves. When the police show up, Batman is just coming to. While he's still in a dazed state, the cops take Batman to a mansion where the Penguin appears. It's his mansion, as it turns out, and accuses Batman of stealing his jade statue. It's a frame-up! One of the most perfect frame-ups? Oh, I don't know. The cops arrest Batman for the theft of the jade statue. Penguin's goons catch up to the police van, run it off the road, and capture Batman and return him to the mansion. Yeah, see, now this is getting overly complicated. Most perfect frame-up status is probably out of reach at this point. The Penguin explains to Batman that the jade statue is actually his, and since he stole it from the auction house, he gets to keep the statue and also file an insurance claim for it. Plus, he's called the police to let them know Batman is back at his mansion, and they'll be here soon. If Batman stays, he'll be arrested again for the theft. If he runs, he risks being shot by the cops, who will absolutely gun down their previously trusted ally Batman over a single act of unarmed art theft, just in case you thought cops being the worst is only a recent thing. Batman knows just how to get out of this jam, however, and it's so obvious I probably don't even have to tell you. Undoubtedly, most of you are way ahead of me on this. You know exactly what Batman's next move is because it's what any one of us would do if we were in his place. So say it with me on 3. 1, 2, 3. He taps out a message to Robin in Morse code by keying the two-way radio hidden in the heel of his boot. We check in for one panel with Commissioner Gordon to establish that he's really bummed out by the Batman's an art thief thing, and then cut to Robin leaping into action at the Penguin's place, taking out the thugs and freeing Batman. Penguin calls the cops again, but this time Batman escapes, distracting the Penguin by throwing a goddamn vase in his face. Batman and Robin disguise themselves as an old man and a Dickensian street urchin and begin spying on the Penguin and his gang. On the night when the Penguin is about to complete a daring robbery of a diamond exchange, Batman and Robin spring into action. Penguin accidentally gives one of his own men a face full of acid from his trick umbrella, then flees to a nearby train station. He and Batman fight on the tracks, but Penguin manages to jump aboard a passing express train and escape into the night. Batman and Robin recover the various items the Penguin has stolen and present them to Commissioner Gordon, who apologizes to Batman for the whole arresting him for being a thief thing from earlier. Batman says, "That's all right, Commissioner. I'm more concerned about missing the Penguin. But something tells me we'll see him again." And Batman's right. They do see him again the very next month in Detective Comics number 59. Batman and Robin see the Penguin a lot more than that, too. He popped up over and over again throughout the Golden Age. But for whatever reason, he never seemed to catch on like the Joker or Catwoman. He was popular enough and a good enough foil for Batman to keep bringing back, but he was usually overshadowed by his fellow rogues. Pretty soon the writers made that an overt part of his character. In Knights of Knavery, the lead story of Batman 25, written by Don C. Cameron, penciled by Jack Burnley, and inked by Jerry Robinson, the Penguin finds himself a cellmate to the Joker. The two criminals go from rivals to partners, and then back to rivals by the end. 3 years later, in Batman number 43, the October 1947 issue, in a story written by Bill Finger with pencils and inks by Jim Mooney and Ray Burnley, respectively, titled The Blackbird of Banditry, the Penguin embarks on a crime spree driven by his jealousy over all the media attention being paid to the Joker and Catwoman. How humiliating. Despite how heavily in rotation he was in the first decade of Batman comics, the Penguin might easily have found himself reduced to a second stringer or worse. There was even a 7-year stretch, from Batman 99 in April of 1956 to Batman 155 in May of 1963, where he didn't appear at all. If you ask me, and you didn't, but you're watching the video, so let's just pretend you did, most of the credit for the Penguin's present-day status as a legend among comic book supervillains belongs to one man. That's right, baby. Burgess Meredith, the man who played the Penguin in the Batman live-action TV series and movie in the late 1960s, in a performance so iconic that 4 decades later, Dick Cheney would spend all 8 years of his vice presidency doing an impersonation of it. Burgess Meredith's take on the Penguin ensured that the character would always be seen as at least in the top 4 among Batman's roster of villains. In the popular imagination, anyway. Comic nerds may argue that he shouldn't be ranked that high, but who gives a shit what they think? Not me! Much like Adam West and Burt Ward's portrayals of Batman and Robin, Cesar Romero's Joker, Frank Gorshin's Riddler, and Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, and Eartha Kitt's Catwomen, Burgess Meredith's Penguin would define the character for an entire generation of fans. That influence could still be felt even once a new generation took over to reinterpret the character. The Penguin runs for mayor plot in the 1992 film Batman Returns carries an echo of a 2-part second season episode of the 1960s TV series where the Penguin runs for mayor. Only in that one, Batman runs against him. Remember that one? That's a fun episode. Can you imagine if Tim Burton had used that part of the plot too? Picture a televised debate between Danny DeVito's Penguin and Michael Keaton's Batman. And mourn the world that might have been. Anyway, Burgess Meredith's Penguin is great and incredibly important to the popularity and longevity of the character, but one of the most memorable episodes of the TV series to feature the Penguin, Season 1's 2-parter, Fine Feathered Finks, The Penguin's a Jinx, was directly inspired by a story from the comics. That story, from Batman number 169, the February 1965 issue, was written by Ed Herron, penciled by Sheldon Moldoff, and inked by Joe Giella, and it's called Partners in Plunder. As the story begins, the Penguin has recently been released from prison and is struggling to plan a new crime worthy not only of his talents, but of Batman's attention. He worries to himself that he might be washed up. Goddamn, this is like a chronic self-esteem issue with him, isn't it? Hey, Penguin, buddy, look at me. You don't need to impress anyone. The only person whose opinion you need to worry about is you. And why should you even care what you think if you don't first love yourself? Now, please continue. Is this going to be some shit with umbrellas? It is going to be some shit with umbrellas, actually. The Penguin is struck by inspiration, and the next day he sends one of his henchmen to the front entrance of a jewelry store to hand out umbrellas to all the customers on the pretense that there's a contest where the person holding the lucky umbrella wins a prize. The only thing is, the guy who actually works at the jewelry store doesn't know anything about an umbrella contest. At precisely 10 a.m., when the contest's winner is supposedly going to be revealed, all the umbrellas carried inside the store pop open and begin shooting out sparks and smoke. The perfect distraction for the Penguin to rob the place, right? No. The guy working at the jewelry store calls the cops, but there is no attempted robbery. 15 minutes later, at a bank across town, another of Penguin's henchmen is doing the same thing, handing out free umbrellas to people walking into the bank. Once again, the umbrellas all pop open automatically. This time, they start flying around. Batman and Robin arrive on the scene, alerted by Commissioner Gordon after the umbrella-related shenanigans at the jewelry store, and take out the flying umbrellas. But once again, no attempted robbery. Batman and Robin notice that the Penguin has written an address on the handles of the umbrellas, the address of his newly opened umbrella shop. On their way to pay Penguin a visit, the dynamic duo encounter more umbrella-related obstacles, a pair of umbrellas rigged to roll down the street in traffic, and an enormous umbrella that falls from the sky and settles down in the middle of town. Once again, there are no apparent crimes committed in conjunction with the umbrellas, and aside from being nuisances, the umbrellas themselves aren't dangerous. Before they arrive at his umbrella store, the Penguin moves his trademark monocle from his right eye to his left. I wonder what that's about. Batman and Robin arrive and accuse the Penguin of being behind the rash of pointless umbrella-related hijinks this morning. But the Penguin protests his innocence, saying that he only sold those umbrellas. He had nothing to do with what happened to them after he left his store. With no evidence that the Penguin has done anything illegal, Batman and Robin leave. On the drive home, they ponder what the Penguin is up to and why he's suddenly wearing his monocle on the other side. We cut back to the Penguin, and one of his henchmen asks him that very question. Why did you switch the monocle to your other eye, boss? And the Penguin says, no reason, just to fuck with Batman. Now he'll waste time trying to figure out what me wearing my monocle on the other eye means when it means nothing. God, I'm good. That night, the Penguin arranges another seemingly pointless umbrella stunt, this time dropping a closed umbrella dangling from the handle of an open, multicolored umbrella. Treating the umbrellas as a clue to the Penguin's next crime, Batman reasons that the colors in the open umbrella might refer to jewels, like the emerald, ruby, and diamond-studded meteorite now on display at the museum. That must be Penguin's scheme. Back at his place, the Penguin is listening in to Batman and Robin. The colorful umbrella is bugged. Penguin's like, steal the jeweled meteorite, good idea. He listens a little more, and Batman even tells him how to do it. Cut into the museum from the roof, pluck the meteorite out of its display case with the extended cane of an umbrella. Child's play, really. The Penguin and his goons show up at the museum where, of course, Batman and Robin are waiting for them, but Penguin's got a surprise. Because he knew that Batman and Robin would be there, he had his goons install a powerful magnet on the roof of the building across the street. When Batman and Robin go to attack, Penguin's goons switch on the magnet, which draws Batman and Robin through the air and over to it, where they find themselves stuck to the wall by their utility belts, which have been secretly magnetized by the last umbrellas they examined. This doesn't exactly tax the intellect of the world's greatest detective, does it? Batman and Robin escape by taking off their utility belts. They return to the roof and tie up the rest of Penguin's gang, but Penguin himself has gotten his hands on the jeweled meteorite and is escaping on a flying umbrella. Batman and Robin grab the two other flying umbrellas that Penguin's goons had planned to use for their getaway, and a good old-fashioned flying umbrella chase ensues. Penguin is forced to toss away his prized jeweled meteorite because the extra weight is allowing Batman and Robin to catch up with him, but it's no good. Robin manages to lasso him, and they take him to jail. With Penguin locked up, Batman's like, there's only one mystery left. Why did you switch your monocle to the other eye, Penguin? And Penguin's standing there thinking, I might be going back to prison, but at least I got one over on him with the monocle bid. Fuck you, Batman! Ha ha! So he ends up arrested and sent back to the pen. Does that work? Penguins don't live in pens. So he ends up arrested and put back on ice. Antarctica, Penguin's natural habitat, nailed it. But at least he gets to claim a meaningless moral victory over Batman with the monocle thing. Classic Penguin. And I do mean classic, because the Penguin isn't really like this anymore. The Colin Farrell, Matt Reeves version we see in The Batman and now in his own HBO series is a far cry from the round little guy in the tuxedo and top hat with an arsenal of trick umbrellas. It's interesting because Batman's other most prominent adversaries haven't really changed much since they were introduced. The Joker has been presented through a variety of interpretations by different writers and artists and actors, but these interpretations are all variations on the same theme. At bottom, the Joker is always pretty much the Joker. Same with Catwoman. Her look has evolved a lot over the years, but in terms of the basic essence of her character, she hasn't changed. The Penguin has. That change began in the comics in the early 1990s with the one-shot Penguin Triumphant, in which the Penguin decides to move away from the outlandish umbrella or bird-related thefts that had been his trademark and explore the less flashy but hopefully more lucrative world of financial crime. But the transformation from classic Penguin to modern Penguin didn't really complete until a few years after the publication of Penguin Triumphant. In the months following the completion of the Prodigal storyline, which saw Dick Grayson step in and assume the role of Batman, which itself was a follow-up to the long-running Nightfall saga, which saw Bruce Wayne suffer a broken back and temporarily retire as Batman, only to come back and defeat his out-of-control successor, Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael. It was a whole thing. I'm sure I'll make a video about it at some point. But in the aftermath of that, the creators of the Batman comics took the opportunity to tweak a few things. For one, they changed Batman's costume. darkening his gray bodysuit and getting rid of the blue trunks, resulting in what is still my favorite Batman costume in any era or medium. And for another, they revamped the Penguin. We meet this new version of one of Batman's oldest villains in Detective Comics number 683, the March 1995 issue, written by Chuck Dixon, penciled by one of my favorite artists ever, Graham Nolan, and inked by Scott Hanna. It's the first half of a two-parter, and it's titled Odds Against. The story opens with a couple of crooks recounting the story of the night's failed job to their boss. Everything was going great until Batman and Robin showed up. This has been happening a lot lately, apparently. Another excellent effort with no reward, says their unseen boss. Then we cut to a close-up of the boss, seen in profile, in shadow, and his silhouette does look familiar, doesn't it? The boss says we'll just have to figure out a new angle that eliminates Batman as a factor. Meanwhile, Batman and Robin are in the Batmobile, driving home after spoiling that job we were just hearing about from the crooks, and Batman is frustrated too. They've been breaking up a lot of attempted robberies lately. Tonight's was the fourth one, but they're still no closer to identifying the mastermind or masterminds behind the jobs. We cut to the Iceberg Lounge, where this guy has been doing really well at the blackjack table. So well, in fact, that a couple of rough-looking gentlemen in the employ of the establishment pull the guy away from the table and walk him over to speak with the proprietor of the establishment. The boss, the same guy from the first scene, is seated at a booth, once again in shadow, and he wants to know how this guy is able to win so much at blackjack. Is he a card counter? No, the gambler explains, I don't count cards. That takes too long. I remember entire hands and calculate odds in my head. If I decide the odds against winning a given hand are too high, I sit that one out. And fun fact, I can use my odds calculating skills in almost any application imaginable, though I can't imagine how that would be of use to you, sir, a simple nightclub owner. The boss, revealed finally in close-up, as if we didn't know, as the Penguin, is intrigued and decides to let this guy live instead of killing him for winning too much money at the card table, which is standard company policy. The Penguin finds out who tipped off Batman and Robin on their last job and has that guy blown up. Coincidentally, the bomb goes off right when Batman and Robin show up to wring some more information out of the guy, and the dynamic duo narrowly avoid getting blown up themselves. Back at the Iceberg Lounge, the Penguin and others from his gang are talking business with the guy from the blackjack table who goes by the name The Actuary. The Penguin explains to the others in the gang how they're going to adjust their method of operation and how the Actuary fits in. The Actuary has gathered newspaper reports covering the activities of Batman and Robin, and he's used them to estimate the odds of when and where Batman and Robin will appear. At one point, the Actuary makes reference to Mr. Cobblepot, and one of the goons says, "Who's Mr. Cobblepot?" Prompting Penguin to respond, "I'm Cobblepot, you cretin. Do you think my parents named me Penguin?" I mean, Jason Lee and Beth Riesgraf named their kid Pilot Inspector, so it's not that far out. Anyway, with help from the Actuary's risk assessment, the Penguin plans a new robbery. His two best goons rob the box office of a hockey arena and escape by simply removing their disguises, attending the hockey game, staying until the end, and filing out with the rest of the fans. It works great until Batman and Robin intercept their car on the way home. Batman doesn't know about the hockey arena score yet. The Actuary has done his job there, but he wants to talk to one of the goons because he's discovered the goon was a cellmate of the snitch who got blown up earlier. Batman ties up the goon, whose name is Nico, and carries him off to be interrogated. Meanwhile, the other goon from the car, McQuaid, has gotten away and run back to tell Penguin the bad news. Penguin isn't worried about Nico squealing. Nico's a good soldier. He's more interested in the new plan from the Actuary, who has come to a realization that he's certain will make their next crime Batman and Robin proof. Since Batman only operates at night, they should pull off a daylight robbery. The story continues in the next issue, Detective Comics number 684, by the same creative team of Dixon, Nolan, and Hanna, with a story titled Darkest Day. We open with Batman's interrogation of Nico. To encourage Nico to be forthcoming, Batman has taken him to an abandoned police forensics facility and stuffed him in a drawer in the morgue. Nico doesn't like this very much, and finally cracks and promises to give Batman some information about his gang's next job, but only in exchange for something from Batman. Batman's like, nah, that doesn't work for me, and he leaves Nico in the drawer in the condemned morgue all night. What's he supposed to do, buy the guy a sandwich and a Coke? Batman's not the good cop, Batman's the bad cop. Or, as Colin Farrell's Penguin says in the movie The Batman, the batshit cop. He's never lost that essential sophistication, has he? Anyway, the next day, Batman visits Nico again, and now that he's had a night to think about it and endure agonizing thirst and starvation, Nico's ready to talk. He gives up that he works for the Penguin, and that the Penguin is planning to rob a flower show. We check in with the flower show, where a gigantic penguin made of flowers has been delivered and wheeled into a spot on the display floor. I wonder if that gigantic penguin will have anything to do with the robbery we know the Penguin is planning. It'd be kind of funny if it turned out to be unrelated, wouldn't it? Anyway, this lady Jill, who seems like she's in charge, is explaining how this brand new convention center is the perfect venue for a flower show because conditions inside can be altered to mimic any time of day and any kind of weather, all with the press of a button on a remote control. Pretty cool. Even Peter David is impressed. A smirking, smart-ass little kid with a bad attitude says to Jill, "Hey, lady, what's the Penguin doing?" And a moment later, the head of the giant penguin pops off, and a gang of masked, armed goons climbs out and orders everybody not to move. Everybody freezes. Well, almost everybody. Someone reaches over Jill's shoulder and grabs her remote control. As the thieves collect the donation barrels, which are stuffed full of cash, and roll them onto the back of the truck, the storm doors close over the convention center skylight, darkening the room. Then one of the goons notices that Peter David has shed his jacket, glasses, hands, and umpire padding, and hey, wait a minute! Do you know what this means? Peter David is Batman! No wonder his Batman Forever novelization had all that stuff that wasn't in the movie. He had an inside source. Himself. Batman takes out the crooks. Some cops pay a visit to the abandoned morgue to pick up Nico. Penguin is disappointed in the failure of the flower show heist and is about to take his disappointment out on the actuary by killing him when Batman walks into the Iceberg Lounge and announces that he knows Penguin was the mastermind behind the job. But no, Penguin insists. Batman! You've got it all wrong. I was just about to make a citizen's arrest. This guy here, alias the actuary, he planned the whole thing. He even framed me as the boss of a robbery ring. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous? I'm sure now that he's caught, he'll go quietly and make a full confession that totally exonerates me, won't you? And the actuary is like, yeah, sure. I'm guilty. It was me. And the story ends with Penguin flashing a malicious grin and reminding the actuary to be careful when he gets to Blackgate Prison because anything can happen in that dreadful place. Nice to see Pingy finally win one, isn't it? For me, this story is a textbook example of how to reinvent a character. This version of the Penguin feels like a significant departure from the wacky little guy with the umbrellas he'd been since his debut in the early 1940s. The Golden and Silver Age Penguin is a classic. I love that version of the character, but he's not well suited to the darker, more serious tone that dominates modern Batman stories. He's too light, too zany to work in that world. But the Penguin we see in Detective Comics 683 and 684, he fits right in with the Batman of the 90s. He feels right at home in that world. And since today, almost 30 years later, this version of the Penguin is still more or less the current one, an organized crime figure rather than a colorful costumed supervillain, I'd call this reinvention a successful one. What I really appreciate about it is that even though the tone is different and even though his methods have changed, the Penguin is still basically a guy who steals shit. He's moved from the front of the operation to behind the scenes, but he still conducts himself with the style and manner of a gentleman while acting as a clever and occasionally ruthless crook. From the funny little guy who Bruce Wayne laughed at and called a fatty, to Burgess Meredith's quacking comedy figure, to Danny DeVito's twisted yet oddly sympathetic vengeful circus freak, to the proprietor of the Iceberg Lounge, to Colin Farrell's intelligent but impulsive gangster, The Penguin has changed a lot over the last 83 years, but one thing has always been the same. What really matters isn't the umbrella, it's the guy holding it. If that wasn't the case, there's no way the Penguin, in any interpretation or incarnation, could have lasted nearly this long. After all, it takes a lot more than a trick umbrella if you're a villain who expects to stand a chance against the best Batman ever.